So thank you everyone for joining us. I think we are good to go. So we've been split into two rooms. First room is about children's rights and women's rights, and this room is about children's rights. So as you know, today is the first day of our virtual conference on human rights, and we are going to explore the theme of being undocumented through different sessions. As Alex has already presented all of us, I'm not gonna go through all of our bios. Just for you to know, I'm Arnaud de Jorna, and I'm moderating the session, today's session on children's rights. And so, scribers from the organization Day1 based in Burkina Faso, Ignace and Farida, are joining me too. So to take notes, and they will be able to then share some key takeaways at the end of today's discussions. So after the second sessions. And finally, in terms of tech support, then Rachel and Tommy are working behind. So everything should be okay. Today with me, we welcome Margaret Zulu, who will be speaking on children's rights. She's from Save the Children South Africa. So please welcome Margaret Zulu today. And just a quick reminder for some practical notes before we start. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So please submit your questions in the chat or hold them for later. We will address around 5 to 6 questions live. Any remaining questions can be sent to aili.undocumented@gmail.com. And so there will be a follow-up after the event. So also please keep your microphones muted and use the raise hand feature if you wish to intervene. But as I said, if it's a question about what Margaret is talking about, then please keep your question for the end of the session. In terms of flow, it will help us to get smoothly through the session. So today's theme is about being undocumented. So we're going to focus on barriers faced by individuals living without official documentation. So it can be barriers to healthcare, barriers to education and legal protection. And so the discussion seeks to not only raise awareness, but also to inspire meaningful action. So please again, join me in welcoming Margaret Zulu from Save the Children South Africa. Margaret, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Arnaud, and good morning, good afternoon, and good day to everyone joining us. I should mention that I'm actually struggling. Even now, as you spoke, I kept being kicked out. And I'm wondering if we will not be able to save time by just playing the recording. If you don't mind, I think it will be faster. And then I'll be happy to take the questions. Arnaud?
Okay, so just for everyone to know, so we ask every speaker to record their presentation for today before today in order to be sure to discuss every subject. So Margaret has made a video which is different from the podcast video that we made together a few weeks ago. So the goal is to go further into children's rights related to undocumented. So let me share my screen. Is everyone able to see my screen? And I hope. And just let me know also, especially if you can actually hear.
Good morning. My name is Margaret Zulu. I oversee the child protection portfolio at Save the Children South Africa. I'm delighted to be contributing.
I think we've lost the sound. Arnaud?
You lost the sound.
Yeah, maybe it was because you muted yourself, so probably you might need to leave you.
Oh, okay. So I'm not gonna mute myself.
Contributing to conversations on child rights at this conference. Save the Children South Africa is a child rights organization that is globally connected to Save the Children International, but locally registered in South Africa. Our vision is to see a world in which every child attains the right to survival, protection, development, and participation. We want to contribute positively to the way the world treats children and to achieve immediate and lasting change in their lives. Therefore, our breakthroughs for 2030 is to see children not only surviving, but also learning and being protected, especially those children that have been most impacted by inequalities and discrimination in South Africa and across the Southern African region. We are a go-to organization on children's rights because we work through purposeful partnerships to share knowledge on child rights and outcomes. We co-create evidence-based innovations with communities to advance child rights, and we also advocate for and with children by amplifying their agency to influence resilient childhoods and also sustainable futures. We are locally registered as indicated and also globally connected to Save the Children International, and children are actively participating in our governance structures. We depend on well wishes from the public, such as you, and private partnerships to effectively respond to children's rights violations and ensure survival, protection, and resilience of all children in South Africa and across the region. Colleagues, it's important to note that violence against children must no longer be tolerated. And to end this pandemic, we need a global community of action to drive impact and change for children. This is why Save the Children South Africa has prioritized child protection to be one of its 3 breakthroughs, in addition to health, education, and child rights, and other cross-cutting issues such as gender equality, social inclusion, ensuring that we do not leave any child behind, including children with disabilities. We need to include climate adaptation, disaster risk reduction, as well as emergency preparedness. Strengthening child protection systems is therefore at the heart of Save the Children's child protection programming. Applying a child rights-based protection system approach will help us to reach all our breakthroughs. We know that we want to see children survive, we want to see them protected, and we also want to see them learn. If children are not safe and protected, their ability to learn and stay healthy is greatly compromised. Working with child protection system will also significantly contribute to reaching the SDG 16.2 to end abuse, exploitation, trafficking, and all forms of violence and torture against children. We therefore, as Save the Children South Africa, recognize that child protection system strengthening is vital to achieve our ambition. We work to prevent violence from happening and respond effectively by strengthening families and caregivers to protect children from violence, supporting the implementation of laws and policies, and working closely with governments and other partners to develop strong child protection systems, where we also work on changing attitudes and social norms, listening to and involving children, building social workforces, and providing services for children. We do all this through direct action, particularly on violations of child rights, and also contributing to evidence generation that provides gaps in child rights responses. And having identified these gaps and also what we are doing well, we share this evidence with children, other partners such as service providers, our communities, and also other stakeholders, so that we can all as a system hold each other accountable. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the equal and inalienable rights of all human beings provide the foundation for freedom, justice, and peace. And as Save the Children South Africa, we work to fulfill children's rights, because a right that is not respected leads to a violation. Redress or reparation can be legally and legitimately claimed. Therefore, a rights-based approach seeks to reinforce the capabilities of duty bearers, usually governments, to respect, protect, and guarantee these rights. It takes into considerations the connections between individuals and the systems of power or influence, and it endeavors to create dynamics of accountability. We know that the primary duty bearers responsible for realizing the rights of children are their parents, guardians, families, as well as caregivers. They are duty-bound to provide children with nurturing care and protection across the caregiving continuum. That is, in their homes, in schools, and in communities. In South Africa, we know that the majority of parents and caregivers, as a result of the legacy of apartheid, themselves marginalized, face multiple and intersecting adversities that disempower them from being able to provide nurturing care and protection. And as a party to the global rights-based development agenda, the government of South Africa and other governments in the SADC region and across the board, the globe, are duty-bound to enable nurturing care. Governments are obligated to support parents, caregivers, and children to overcome the combined risks and adversities through policies and programs, providing the combinations of services, support, and protection necessary to overcome the risks and enable the provision and receipt of nurturing care and protection of children. This is why Articles 2 and 3 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and General Principles of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child speak to non-discrimination, where the convention asserts that the state parties to the present convention shall respect and ensure the rights set forth in the convention to each child within their jurisdiction without discrimination of any kind, irrespective of the child's or his or her parents' or legal guardian's race, color, sex, language, religion, political or any other opinion, national, ethnic or social origin, property, disability, birth, or any other status. The principle is that all rights apply to all children without exception. The state itself has obligation to put into place the means to ensure children are protected from any form of discrimination and to take positive action to promote their rights. Moreover, Articles 3 and 4 of the Convention speaks to best interests of the child, and it asserts that In all actions concerning children, whether undertaken by public or private social welfare institutions, the courts of law, administrative authorities, or legislative bodies, the best interests of the child shall be a primary consideration. The best interests principle covers all decision-making affecting boys and girls, including the mobilization and allocation of resources. Children's best interests will not normally be the only consideration when decisions are made which affect children, but must be among the first aspects to be considered and should be given considerable weight. A primary consideration relative to the interests of adults. It is important for those taking decisions to take into consideration the views of the child and ensuring that their voices are heard. Articles 6 and 4 of the Convention further speaks to the right to life, survival, and development. It asserts that state parties recognize that every child has the inherent right to life. State parties shall ensure to the maximum extent possible the survival and development of the child. This article establishes the principle that children have the right to life and in addition affirms that every child has the right to those inputs and provisions that will enable them to develop to their full potential and play their part in a peaceful, tolerant society. Furthermore, Articles 12 and 7 on the right to be heard asserts that state parties shall ensure to the child who is capable shall assure to the child who is capable of forming his or her own views the right to express those views freely in all matters affecting the child, the views of the child being given due weight in accordance with the age and maturity of the child. Boys and girls have the right to be heard in all decisions affecting them, and Articles 12 actually places an obligation on governments to ensure that boys and girls' views are sought and considered. This article is part of a wider body of participation rights of children that ensure that children are involved and is defined as Article 12 together with other articles such as Article 13, which speaks to freedom of expression, Article 14, which also speaks to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, Article 15, which speaks to freedom of association, and also Article which speaks to the right to privacy. I also highlight Article 17, which also speaks to access to appropriate information. Therefore, in the UN Convention, children are recognized as social actors, both in relation to their own development and that of society. They're active players in everything that concerns them and the communities in which they live. I would now like us to take a moment and look at our child rights situation in South Africa. South Africa has a child population of about 22 million children. And after 10 or more years of poor policies and resourcing, the majority still remain at risk of poor outcomes and of remaining trapped into the intergenerational cycle of poverty and inequality. The World Bank's Human Capital Index quantifies the contribution of health and education to the productivity of the next generation of workers. Amount of human that a child born today can expect to attain by age 18. And despite significant policy innovations, increased health and education budgets, near universal school enrollment and a decreasing child mortality rate, Human Capital Index in South Africa has stagnated at 0.43 since 2010. We also note that the Thrive by 5 index confirms that the deprivations start early. 57% of children attending an early learning program are not on track for cognitive or physical development. They face barriers to thriving, which limit their chances of realizing their full potential. We know that about 82% of grade 4 learners can't read for meaning compared to 78% in 2016. It's important as I proceed for me to highlight also the increasing number of teenage pregnancies that we continue to face. And this also speaks to the issue of sexual abuse, which I'm going to allude to in the upcoming slides. In our recent child rights situation analysis in South Africa, we found that corporal punishment against children, though banned by law, is still happening in the home setting and in school. Evidence further indicates that children continue to experience forms of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. We also know that we still have children who are not registered at birth within their first year. We know that these children, because of lack of birth registration and any form of identification or documentation, face significant challenges when it comes to accessing basic services such as education and health. I now bring to your attention our specific focus for this particular conversation, which is child migrants in South Africa and in the SADC region. And we know that although detailed age-specific migration analysis is pending, the 2022 South African census showed international migrants increasing to 2.4 million, with 86% originating from the Southern African Development Community. We know that a lot of persons that are migrating are coming from neighboring countries, mostly from the SADC region, and we see increasing number of children also migrating on their own from other countries and coming to South Africa as a preferred destination for most persons that are migrating. However, we know that the South African census lacks data on whether child migrants are unaccompanied and only indicates if they reside in child-headed households at the time of census. We know that these children are migrating. We can, as of 2020, when it was reported, and these statistics are actually not portraying the actual picture in South Africa, where it is reported that we have at least 642,000 migrants under 18. That was in 2017, a long time ago. This indicates to us how challenging it is to have proper statistics on unaccompanied and separated migrant children in South Africa. Therefore, it is crucial for us to relook at this data gap of children that are migrating. We know that we do have refugee children. We have children that are at a risk of statelessness in South Africa. And we know that these children often, as they move, face violence and exploitation during migration, and sometimes even arriving without caregivers and even separated and are on their own. We know that some of these children suffer post-traumatic stress disorders or are actually traumatized from all their experiences from when they begin their journey and during the journey to South Africa, and also as they arrive in their host communities. We highlight these gaps on data about unaccompanied and separated migrant children because this gap impedes effective planning for the care and protection of these children. Migration estimates disaggregated by unaccompanied child status are really vital for authorities and all other duty bearers to improve support, addressing barriers such as birth registration, education, and healthcare access. We know that we are still falling short as a nation in ensuring that all children, irrespective of where they come from, have access to all the services and all protections that they require. Let me take this moment to bring to your attention these categories that have been mentioned in the previous slides on child migrants. It's imperative for us to understand these categories of child migrants to inform holistic child protection services. So we know of terms such as an asylum seeker, who is a child or person requesting or applying for asylum status. However, it has not been finally decided on by a prospective country of refuge. Unaccompanied children speak to those unaccompanied minors who are children and have been separated from both parents and other relatives and are not being cared for by an adult who by law or custom is responsible for doing so. Separated children are children who have been separated from both parents or from their previous legal or customary primary caregiver, but not necessarily from other relatives. These may include children accompanied by other adult family members. We are also aware of trafficked children, and yes, that is happening. And these are children taken out of their protective environments and preying on their vulnerability for purposes of exploitation. And in terms of Articles 1 of the Convention relating to the status of stateless persons, a stateless person means a person who is not considered as a national by any state under the operations of its law. I highlight these common ones for purposes of the next slides, that we are speaking solely to some of the gaps that still exist, the protection gaps for these groups of children, including undocumented and children who are currently stateless or are at a risk of being stateless in South Africa. It's important to note, as we highlight some of the gaps that we are identifying and are learning as we support the work that is being done on protecting children in South Africa. we highlight that the South African government has made significant strides in promoting children's rights, including those of unaccompanied and separated migrant children. This commitment is evident in its ratification of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child in 1995 and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child in 2000. The United Convention on the Rights of the Child sets clear standards for education access. Article 28 obligates state countries to progressively ensure free and compulsory primary education, accessible secondary education, and higher education opportunities based on individual ability. The CRC emphasizes equal opportunity, ensuring that these rights apply to all children, regardless of immigration status. It further suggests South Africa's commitment to education. Article 11 of the ACWC emphasizes a holistic, culturally aware education for all children, focusing on reducing dropout rates and ensuring equal access, especially for girls and disadvantaged children. Despite South Africa's ratification of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the ACWC, the implementation of these commitments, particularly for children on the move, remain inconsistent. And this inconsistency persists even though Section 28 of the Bill of Rights in the South Africa's Constitution explicitly protects the rights of all children in South Africa. South Africa has further established a robust legal framework to safeguard children's rights. It has established this legal framework that, such as the South Africa's School Act. I refer to the Constitution, Act 108 of 1996, Children's Act 38 of 2005, which has also been amended to include definitions of unaccompanied and separated migrant children. There's the Refugees Act 130 of 1998, the Child Justice Act of 78 of 2008, Immigration Act 13 of 2002. But it's important for me to highlight the recent Immigration Amendment Bill of 2024 after the white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection of 2023 had proposals of the immigration systems overhaul, and out of which we now have the Immigration Amendment Bill, whose submissions has been requested and was due on 22nd November. And we know that together with other civil society organizations and communities, we've been given a chance to highlight aspects of the bills and to indicate what our comments are on this particular bill. And for us, this is a step ahead because there's participation. We could do better on the participation of children in making submissions on this particular bill. However, we applaud the Department of Home Affairs for ensuring that there is submissions and comments on this Immigration Amendment Bill of 2024. Why do I stress on this bill? This is because this bill would then govern what the rights of children on the move, particularly including unaccompanied and separated migrant children. We also have the national guidelines on the care and management of unaccompanied and separated migrant children, and it's being spearheaded by the Department of Social Development, and we know that we do have the interdepartmental protocol on the multi-sectoral management of unaccompanied and separated migrant children in South Africa, where we see commitments from different departments in South Africa in the care and protection of unaccompanied and separated migrant children. We know that the approval process is still in place. However, we are happy that this is happening, and we look forward to further conversations with all departments to ensure that all the commitments on the protections of children, including unaccompanied and separated migrant children in South Africa, are honored according to this protocol. Let me go back to child protection again and indicate that child protection cannot happen without focus on guiding principles. And these guiding principles include best interests of the child, non-discrimination. We want the child to be heard, ensuring that in all decisions that are made for and about the children, their voices are evident in these decisions. I also highlight community participation, informed consent, and participation of children themselves in these principles. Let me draw your specific attention to the principle of non-discrimination, which prohibits any discrimination on the basis of the status of a child as being unaccompanied or separated, or as being a refugee, asylum seeker, or migrant. The best interests of the child principle, which is of paramount importance in a search for short and long-term solutions, because any decision fundamentally impacting the life of the child, the best interests of that child should be determined. And in determining the best interests of the child's views should be taken into consideration based on their age, maturity, and stage of development, and the ability to evaluate any possible consequences. The principle of child participation is equally important, because the right of the child to express his or her own views freely is critical in any decision making. In determining the measures to be adopted with regard to separated and unaccompanied migrant children, the child's views and wishes should be elicited and taken into account in accordance with the age, maturity, and stage of development. Effective communication, therefore, becomes key to genuine participation of children. As Save the Children South Africa, we are always happy to be able to provide cultural mediation, which includes interpretation through our cultural mediators to ensure that there is no language barrier between the child and the caregiver or the social worker, as we determine the best interests of the child. It is essential for the child to be able to speak in their own language, and a cultural mediator or an interpreter being able to interpret effectively. The principle of confidentiality also continues to be critical in these processes, as state parties must protect the confidentiality of information received in relation to children, consistent with the obligation to protect the child's rights, including the right to privacy. Therefore, these principles are important, and we recognize that they have been adopted also in the Department of Social Development guidelines on unaccompanied and separated migrant children in South Africa, and they are visible in all other key policies and legal instruments that govern the care and protection of unaccompanied and separated migrant children in South Africa. We also see that in the Interdepartmental Protocol on the Multidisciplinary Management of Unaccompanied and Separated Migrant Children in South Africa, and we do applaud that. These guiding principles do take cognizance of international principles listed in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and apply to each child within the state and within this jurisdiction. Though the vulnerabilities of migrant and unaccompanied and separated migrant children are well documented, I must indicate that we still struggle with regards to data on how many unaccompanied and separated migrant children in South Africa. We also, and this impacts on their protections. We also struggle at all levels, in our opinion, with regards to ensuring holistic protections of these children and ensuring that they have access to all services that they require, such as education and health. And by that, I am also indicating the gaps that exist in the care and protection, particularly of children involved in migration. Despite South Africa's institutionalized child protection system, many unaccompanied and separated migrant children, particularly the ones that are separated, slip through the cracks, meaning access to identifying documents is by far the biggest gap, which limits these children's access to education. It increases their risk of statelessness or risk of deportation when there is no clear data. We have indicated that, especially a clear data collection framework or coordinated systematic data collection and information management system to ensure that all children who are separated and unaccompanied and have migrated into South Africa are known. And this results in lack of information about the actual number of unaccompanied and separated migrant children in South Africa. And let me pause and indicate that some of these gaps, in spite of what the Department of Home Affairs is doing to ensure that there's protection, there is the border management authorities at the border. Some of our suggestions have been that we have child-friendly sections at the border, mainly because the movement of these children sometimes are irregular, and it becomes quite difficult to be able to see the actual numbers of these children. And we also indicated earlier on that there's issues of trafficking, and of late we have been seeing in the media about the Stilfontein crisis, where we have children from neighboring countries, including Mozambique, that have been working there on the mines. And we know that some of these children were actually forced to come and work under the mines. In the mines there. We also know that some of the children were actually promised employment. However, they were not aware what kind of employment they are going to undertake. And so we see the vulnerabilities of these children mainly because of poverty, that as a child, they are now exposed to further violations.
Everyone, please. Because the presentation is longer that that's what we expect to do. We're gonna pause the presentation now. So thank you, Margaret, for this video. That was really insightful, especially regarding South Africa and the SADC region. I think you really shows us what are the relations between children's rights, but also women's rights, the fact of being stateless, to suffer from smuggling and trafficking, to like basic services and etc. So I think it really shows us all the link that children, but also in general people on the migration roads face. So Margaret, are you there? Because now we can go for some questions, so you can ask them directly by raising your hands through the hands-on feature. Damien, you have one. Chris, you have no. That's on. Okay. And if you don't feel to, for any reason, to ask a question directly, you can text them in the chat box. So Damien, you have a question? Great.
Yeah, I see the room will close in 30 seconds, so I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I just wanted to say, Margaret, thank you for